All right, we have some breaking news. We are getting closer and closer to accountability, but it is still not nearly enough. The execution of 37-year-old ICU nurse Alex Preddy has brought a political firestorm upon DC and upon the White House. And now Donald Trump is quite literally trapped in a corner where we are multiple days away from a government shutdown on January 31st. And the only way to stop this government shutdown is to remove the funding for the Department of Homeland Security, remove the funding for Kristi Noem, and remove the funding for ICE agents to have more equipment, more availability, more means to move around the country and inflict terror on U.S. citizens. Now, Democrats have their own wish list. They want to use all of the leverage they have to pressure Donald Trump, and I am all for it. He is backed in a corner, and he has no way out. Either the government partially shuts down in 3 days. It won't be a full shutdown, but it'll be enough of a shutdown to basically nuke the Republican Party even more heading into a midterms that already look perilous for them. Or what he could do is give Democrats what they want by separating the DHS funding and sending it back to the House. But then, as you know, in order for a bill to pass, the House and Senate have to agree on it perfectly. So the House will likely shoot down the ICE funding because they don't have enough of a majority. Mike Johnson hasn't kept his caucus in order. Marjorie Taylor Greene resigned. And a few Republicans aren't really sure about the ICE funding, so they won't vote for it. So Democrats have the ultimate leverage to ask for whatever they want. And because of that, the breaking news is that 2 federal immigration agents involved in the shooting death of Alex Preddy have been placed on administrative leave per standard agency protocol. This is Donald Trump making concession after concession after concession in Washington, desperately trying to avoid this looming government shutdown. I mean, he immediately demoted Greg Bovino. That one was easy for him. Now Greg Bovino is soon set to retire and ride off into the sunset, or the darkness for him, honestly. After demoting Greg Bovino, he then reassigned Kristi Noem, took her away from Minnesota, took her off of interior deportations, and put her on the border, where she's now in a much more quiet position. He then sort of threw Stephen Miller under the bus by saying that no one in his administration would call Alex Preddy a domestic terrorist, basically implying that that would be insane when Stephen Miller said that exactly. So he's trying to distance himself from this awful cover-up that he perpetuated, that he started, by making concession after concession after concession. But you know what the problem with this is? The 2 federal immigration agents being on administrative leave, so they get paid time off that's non-disciplinary and temporary, that is not enough for people who executed someone. I want them investigated. I want there to be consequences. I want them to explain their thoughts and intents in a court of law within the next 30 days. Democrats need to continue applying pressure. And the worst part is they didn't follow protocol before the shooting, during the shooting, or after the shooting. Greg Bovino got in front of everybody in Minneapolis and explained that the 2 agents who did the shooting were back on the field in a different state. So they can just wear masks, murder somebody, then be back on the field. This is not regular, even if the shooting was in self-defense. Like, even if we did have a situation where a cop defended himself and shot somebody, which this happens all the time, there is always going to be time off after that for psychological reasons. So the fact that they threw these men back on the field is wild.
Commander Bovino, when it comes to the shooting, from what I understand, there were 2 agents who fired shots. We know one of the agents had 8 years experience, and we know he was a less lethal instructor and had this training. What did the other agent, what was his history, and are they both working right now, or are they on administrative leave?
All agents that were involved in that scene are working, not in Minneapolis, but in other locations. That's for their safety. There's this thing called doxing, and the safety of our employees is very important to us. So we're going to keep those employees safe. As far as the number of shots, the number of agents involved.
This clip got 5.6 million views because of how bizarre it was. They want to keep their agents safe by sending rogue, overly aggressive, emotionally volatile agents back on the field right after they shot somebody. Then we started to get concessions and backoffs from the administration. Like last night, Stephen Miller acknowledged it was a, quote, possible breach of protocol. That is wild coming from Stephen Miller. And also, by the way, he's bullshitting. Stephen Miller likes this. He loves it. He loves to call these people domestic terrorists after murdering an ICU nurse or a mother of 2 or 3 children.
This is quite stunning coming from Stephen Miller, who, of course, has been one of the most hard-line immigration enforcers when it comes to President Trump's administration. He is essentially conceding or acknowledging that there might have been a breach of protocol when it comes to the shooting of Alex Preddy. And just a reminder, this is the same person who said that Preddy in the aftermath was a would-be assassin. This is what the statement says, and he lays this out very clearly. It says that the White House provided clear guidance to DHS that the extra personnel that had been sent to Minnesota to force protection should be used for conducting fugitive operations to create a physical barrier between the arrest teams and the disruptor teams. It goes on to say, we are evaluating why the CBP team may not have been following that protocol.
I'm sorry, but you don't get to call people domestic terrorists and assassin and then a few days later say, hey, we're waiting for the investigation to play out. All the administration officials have played this game that I call Schrodinger's investigation, where they get to make declarative statements to control the narrative, but then when anybody else tries to question that or make our own statements, they say, wait a minute, let's let the investigation play out. No, you don't get to just make your declarative statements all of the time, which is good. It's good that the U.S. agents were at least placed on administrative leave. We can say that, yes, of course. It's good that the agents were removed off of the field after 4 days of continuing their operations, but this was only in response to a few things. Number one, national outrage. Here are protests in Minneapolis sparking. This is a few months ahead of a midterms that already looked awful for the Republicans. So this was only going to get worse for them. We even had protests yesterday in New York continuing to break out. But beyond the protests, think about how awful and damaging it would be, not only for the American people, but for the Trump administration to go through yet another government shutdown in the course of a few months. And this government shutdown would be because they want more funding for ICE. There are two things happening simultaneously right now. The healthcare price for Americans is skyrocketing due to the expiration of the ACA subsidies. So premiums are skyrocketing. That money is then going to be funded basically directly into more ICE operations across the country. I mean, man, it's so easy for Americans to be radicalized against the current system, not in a nefarious way, doing radical things, but I just mean to be radicalized against the status quo in the current system when it's not working for them. When the healthcare lobbyists are in Donald Trump's pocket, in the pockets of Republicans, in order to get them to maintain this old system. Don't extend these sort of premiums or subsidies because it doesn't help us. And then the Republicans do that for the richest of the rich donors. I'm a big fan of the Democrats' demand list for the DHS. I hope they can turn it from a wish list into a demand list by using leverage. Trump is obsessed with leverage, 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 and now Democrats have all of it. They can get whatever concessions they want. Democrats are coalescing around a number of DHS bill changes. 1. Require judicial warrants for immigration arrests, overruling a recently disclosed ICE memo asserting they are not required. This is honestly, I can't lie, a non-concession because the Constitution already says this. We already have a contract called the Constitution which says you can't bust down people's doors with no warrants. They then say, mandate federal agents identify themselves. That's a pretty good one. We need identification and accountability. Imagine QR codes so every agent can be scanned. Then, require DHS to cooperate with state and local investigations. That is good because the DHS has been spiking multiple investigations as they play out. Limit the mission creep of federal agencies, where the size, scope, and scale of what federal agencies does creeps and grows larger and larger and larger. And we go from 800 agents in Minneapolis to 2,000 agents in Minneapolis to now 3,000 agents in Minneapolis. I'm going to leave it there. If you all appreciate these videos, drop a like, subscribe. I'll see you on the next one. Peace out.